The PlayStation is a fantastic console, and thanks to this X-Station mod, I can play any game I like on real hardware. More importantly, I also have RGB Scart so that the video output can look the best the console can offer. At this point, I have many ways to play PlayStation games, including emulation. However, one of my favourite ways to experience PlayStation 1 games is to play them on a PlayStation Portable. This portable system even has video out, so you can enjoy the games on a television. But what about the PlayStation Vita? It plays the games well, if not better in some ways, thanks to 2 analog sticks. There is a catch. This does not have video out built in, unlike the PlayStation Portable. The PlayStation TV was needed for this, until now. Thanks to the hacking community, the PlayStation Vita can now output video due to a hack allowing it to be seen as a web camera on OBS. I have it working and I wondered, how does it fare compared to real hardware and the PlayStation Portable? To find out, I got a few games of different resolutions together and tested all 3 side by side. Here's the setup for all 3 systems. The PlayStation will use the RGB Scart cable and the OSSC at line 5X for 240p or 288p games and line 4X for the 480i high resolution games. The PlayStation Portable will use component cables and exactly the same settings as the PlayStation 1 via the OSSC. However, because the PlayStation Portable can switch between interlaced and progressive outputs, the progressive mode will be used when a game outputs in the PlayStation 1's high resolution mode. You'll see why later. The PlayStation Vita will be connected via its included USB cable to my MacBook Pro 16 and recorded at its native resolution through OBS. I tried to make the image as sharp as possible by disabling the bilinear filter, but I enabled it with high-res games as it gave a cleaner output in my opinion. With that, it's testing time! We begin with an underrated 2D fighting game. Asuka 120% has a practice mode, perfect for comparing the video output of all 3 systems. Naturally, the PlayStation looks great. The RGB quality is sharp, colourful and pleasing to the eye. Nothing wrong with the picture, and I love how the OSSC makes this a joy to play even on a 4K display. Compared to the PlayStation Portable, this one is not quite as sharp as the PlayStation. I do find despite this fact, the output is pretty good and still sharp enough. Of course, on the 4K display, you will notice the blurrier image, and I believe either a forced bilinear filter is being applied, or as some people suggest, the PlayStation Portable doesn't perfectly scale PlayStation 1 games, thus the resulting blur taking place. What about the Vita? Well, I turned off the bilinear filtering in the menu and used the normal mode for screen scaling. The result was this. There's a lot to say about what I'm seeing. The sharpness is on par with the PlayStation despite a lack of assisted upscaling, and the contrast and highlights are cranked up compared to the other systems. It gives the Vita a distinct look, and for this game, I quite like it. I wonder if it's a result of the OLED screen in some way. Unfortunately, the hack has limits, and when the game starts to move, the frame rate is cut to 30 frames per second rather than the 60 the other 2 display. It's not the Vita, the software is the problem here. At least the Vita keeps up visually, so there's untapped potential here. Let's keep the 2D going with Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This is a great looking game, and as you'd expect, on real hardware, the game is a sight to behold. The PlayStation could do 2D and do it well when made in mind for the hardware. The PlayStation Portable has a decent showing. Yes, the blurring is evident and it's not as crisp as the PlayStation, however, it plays well and I feel it still delivers a decent experience. I've always had a soft spot for the PlayStation Portable video output. The Vita again stands out, but this time not for the right reasons. It looks sharp as expected when the bilinear filtering is off, and again I like the contrast, but we get 30 frames per second instead of 60, and there's shimmering in the graphics when the screen scrolls. This might explain why the PlayStation Portable has a blur when playing 240p or 288p games. I could reduce it by applying the bilinear filtering at the expense of a sharp picture. I think out of the three, the PlayStation definitely wins. Let's see how Darkstalkers 3 fares on all three systems. This one is actually a tough one to call between the three. The PlayStation is as you'd expect by now. Darkstalkers 3 is a very colourful game and the 2D sprites and backgrounds look great here. RGB definitely is the way to go, or S-Video if that's not available. The PlayStation Portable is softer in visual output, but I think some people might actually like this look. There's something about it that looks correct to me, even if that makes no sense. I bet this look on a CRT would be perfect pairing for you Darkstalker fans out there. The Vita again is a bit decisive for me. It looks sharp yet messier than the other two options, as it just looks weird. Almost as if the pixels are misaligned or something. Maybe the shimmering effect is in play yet again. It's a shame because otherwise the Vita looks great. The colours and contrast pop and it suits the Darkstalkers look. Yes, the frame rate is only 30 again, but I hope we can get more from the PS Vita output. I guess the PS TV could be the answer when hacked. Let's try a 3D game that also has widescreen support. Jarrett and Labonte stock car racing fits the bill. On PlayStation, the game looks really good despite the 240p resolution, and seeing a widescreen PlayStation game is always a treat. The PlayStation Portable keeps the same great widescreen and still looks good, but as expected, it's not as sharp as the PlayStation. I think it looks acceptable, and I actually reviewed the game using the PlayStation Portable 2 years ago now. The Vita is sharp, and with a contrast and highlight boost, it certainly has the most interesting look. I do find it a bit more jaggy looking compared to the other two options, and it's a bit dark, but overall it looks pretty good. Which one would you take? Let's change gears and look at Dead or Alive. All three are using different ways of outputting the picture. The PlayStation is using 480i or 576i Line 4X via Bloddy interlacing from the OSSC to upscale the picture. The PlayStation Portable is in progressive mode and using 480p Line 2X via the OSSC. The PlayStation Vita is using the normal screen mode and bilinear filter to smooth out the image. The PlayStation is sharp, but the Bloddy interlacing makes the image jumpy, and although I'm used to it, some of you may not like the look. At least it is high quality. Perhaps motion adaptive deinterlacing would be better. The PlayStation Portable is not quite as sharp in its output, but I love the way it looks. It has a smooth, less rough image, and the 480p works well for deinterlacing the picture. To me, this looks pleasing, at least until I get a device that uses motion adaptive deinterlacing technology. The PlayStation Vita looks good too. The bilinear filter works well with 480i resolution, resulting in a smooth, clean look with decent detail left over. Of course, the only downside is the 30 frames per second cap on the software side. Still looks good though. Which of these would you pick? I think I've explained enough, so I will provide a montage of more games and keep looking out for the settings used for each game that I tested. Enjoy and hear my thoughts at the end. With all that done, let's sum up these three and see which one you should go for. The PlayStation was pretty spot on. With RGB at least, the video output was sharp with decent contrast and the right amount of colours present. I enjoyed the PlayStation, and couple it with the OSSC, a CRT television or another high-end upscaler, the console really does shine in its picture quality. The PlayStation Portable did a good job overall, replicating the PlayStation video output when using component cables, but all 240p games suffered from blurring compared to the PlayStation. It's not as sharp, but still pretty acceptable. 480i content when using the progressive mode was definitely the shining point, and it looks great on a modern display. That aspect the PlayStation Portable wins, unless you have a good upscaler that uses motion adaptive deinterlacing. The Vita is interesting. It has options that the PlayStation Portable lacks when video out is hacked, and the colours, contrast and sharpness was pretty compelling. It made this choice stand out. However, the sharpness came at a cost to some games showing scrolling artifacts which are never pleasant to experience, the frame rate which is cut to 30 frames per second, and there's no sound. Yes, recording gives you no sound, which is always fun. If someone knows how to get the sound working with the Vita video output, that would be welcomed. Overall, the PlayStation wins between these three, but there's many options out there for playing PlayStation titles, and maybe the Vita could improve one day? What do you folks think of the results? Would you try the video output hack on the PlayStation Vita? Let me know in the comments, and hopefully, I'll see you guys again soon.